It started with a wedding invitation, not mine, obviously. My best friend Jordan's sister was getting married, and I was invited as his +1. We'd been friends since 6th grade, the kind of inseparable duo that somehow survived different colleges, different cities, even different time zones. So when he asked if I wanted to be his wingman for the weekend, I said yes without thinking twice. I didn't know his older brother was going to be there. In fact, I hadn't even thought about Owen in years. He was 3 years ahead of us, always in and out of the house during high school, just enough for me to remember the way he'd lounge around in worn-out tank tops, tanned from football practice, always smelling like sweat and cologne. I never said more than 10 words to him back then. I was the quiet, awkward best friend of his annoying little brother, and yet, even then, I had a thing for him. A stupid, hopeless crush I buried under video games and late-night homework sessions with Jordan. So when I showed up at the rustic lodge where the wedding was taking place, dragging my duffel bag up the wooden steps, the last person I expected to see holding the front door open was Owen. He looked older, obviously, more put together, hair shorter, beard thicker. Still tall, still built like a guy who probably played college football and never really stopped working out. But his smile when he saw me, that was new. "Eli?" he asked, tilting his head. "No way. You've changed." I laughed, half nervous, suddenly aware of how sweaty my palms were. "Yeah, puberty hit eventually," he grinned, stepping aside to let me in. "Guess so. Come on, Jordan's inside. I think he's already raiding the open bar." The lodge smelled like cedar and fresh pine, with windows that looked out over a sparkling lake. It was all very Pinterest perfect, but I barely noticed, because the moment I walked in, I could still feel Owen's eyes on me, like he was checking me out in that subtle, polite way people do when they think you won't notice. I noticed. Jordan gave me a bear hug, caught me up on the wedding chaos, introduced me to his cousins and the rest of the bridal party. It was loud, a little overwhelming, and weirdly fun. But the whole time, I kept catching glimpses of Owen. And he kept catching glimpses of me. Later that evening, after the rehearsal dinner, a bunch of us ended up by the lake. The air had cooled just enough to make the bonfire necessary. Someone passed around beers, someone else pulled out a Bluetooth speaker. It was one of those moments that didn't feel real, too picturesque to be anything but a movie scene. I was sitting on the dock when Owen walked over and sat beside me. "Thought you might want some air," he said, handing me a drink. "Thanks," I said, cracking it open. Needed a break from all the cousin introductions. He laughed, leaning back on his elbows. "It's a lot, but I'm glad you came." I glanced over. "Why's that?" He looked at me then, really looked. "Because I remember you. Quiet kid who used to always have one headphone in. Now you're different." I raised an eyebrow. "Good different or weird different?" "Definitely good," he said, and there was something in his voice. Something quieter, rougher. "Jordan told me you were coming. Didn't expect to feel like this." "Like what?" He hesitated, then looked away. "Like I shouldn't be thinking what I'm thinking." The air between us changed, tightened. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, heart thudding in my chest, wondering if he could hear it. He didn't move closer, didn't touch me, just sat there, letting the silence stretch between us like a rubber band about to snap. And I knew, in that moment, that this weekend wasn't going to go the way I expected. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because the mattress was uncomfortable or the pillows were too soft. Not because Jordan snored like a chainsaw 2 beds over. I couldn't sleep because every time I closed my eyes, all I could think about was the way Owen had looked at me on that dock. Like he wanted something he wasn't supposed to want. It messed with my head. I hadn't come to this wedding looking for anything. If anything, I told myself it was going to be a chill, maybe even boring weekend of small talk, awkward dancing, and trying not to cry during the vows. I hadn't prepared for Owen to suddenly appear in my orbit like a fully grown, impossibly attractive curveball from the past. and I definitely hadn't prepared for him to say what he did. In the morning, the lodge was buzzing with wedding prep. Jordan was running around in sweats with a clipboard, looking more stressed than the bride. I spent most of the day trying to stay out of the way, moving chairs, folding napkins, making polite conversation with a cousin who insisted I looked like Timothy Chalamet, but Owen wasn't around. Not until later, when I was outside fiddling with the fairy lights around the patio and heard footsteps behind me. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing up at a crooked strand. I didn't even turn. "You gonna fix it?" He laughed, and it did something stupid to my chest. "Only if you hold the ladder." "Deal." He climbed up slowly, and I swear it took everything in me not to stare at the way his shirt lifted as he reached up, revealing a sliver of skin just above his waistband. I focused on the ladder. I was a good friend, a responsible adult, totally not checking out my best friend's brother. When he climbed down, he was close. Close enough that I could smell the faint scent of his aftershave. Clean and warm. "You didn't answer me last night," he said quietly. I blinked. "About what?" He gave me that same look, the one from the dock, the one that sent my stomach into free fall. "About what I said. That I was thinking things I shouldn't be." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. Maybe I was thinking the same thing. Owen's eyes didn't leave mine. "That's dangerous. Only if you make it something it's not." We stared at each other for a beat too long. Then Jordan's voice rang out from the other side of the yard. "Eli, can you help with the centerpieces?" I stepped back, like I'd been caught doing something illegal. "I should..." "Yeah," Owen said quickly. "Go." But as I walked away, I felt his gaze on my back the whole way across the lawn. That night, after the rehearsal dinner part 2, because apparently weddings need multiple meals, I wandered out onto the back deck. The stars were out, the lake was dark and glassy, and for a moment it felt like I could breathe again. Then I heard the sliding door open behind me. "I thought you'd be out here," Owen said. I didn't turn around, just said, "Did you follow me?" "No, but I was hoping you'd come out." He stood beside me, close but not touching. Our elbows almost brushed. "You're making this hard?" he said. "I haven't done anything." "Exactly," he said, and his voice was rough around the edges. "And it's still hard." We stood in silence, the tension between us thick and electric. I could hear the hum of cicadas, the soft rustle of trees. I felt every inch of space between us and every inch of my body that wanted to close that space. "I shouldn't," he whispered. "But you want to," I said, not even sure where the words were coming from. He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I do." I finally looked at him, and that was the moment where everything tilted, like the world had shifted, and neither of us could pretend anymore. He leaned in just enough for me to feel the question in the air between us, but he didn't move further. He was waiting. So I did the thing I'd been wanting to do since I was 16. I closed the space. Our lips met softly, just a brush at first, testing, tasting, but then his hand came up to the back of my neck and pulled me in. And the kiss deepened into something hungry, something neither of us had words for. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless. "So," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "still think this is dangerous?" He smiled. "Definitely." But he didn't let go. The kiss changed everything. We didn't say much afterward. He squeezed my hand once before we headed back inside, both of us pretending nothing had happened even though everything had. The energy between us was different now. Charged, silent, full of things we weren't ready to say out loud. Jordan didn't notice. He was too busy giving an impromptu toast in the living room, holding a half-empty champagne flute, and making everyone laugh with a story about the bride's obsession with llamas. I sat next to Owen on the edge of the couch. Our knees brushed. Neither of us moved away. But later, back in our shared room, the one Jordan and I were crashing in for the weekend, I couldn't sleep again. I just lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying that kiss over and over in my head. The way Owen's hand had gripped the back of my neck, the sound of his breath against mine, the fact that he kissed me back like he meant it, and the craziest part, he did. I knew it in the way he looked at me when he thought no one was watching. I knew it in the way his voice had dropped, the hesitation, the conflict in his eyes. Owen wasn't playing a game. He was figuring something out. And somehow, I was part of that. The next morning, we pretended like nothing had happened. Breakfast was loud and chaotic. There were kids running around, the bride yelling about missing corsages, and someone knocking over a mimosa tray. Jordan was in full crisis mode, trying to keep everyone calm, and I stayed busy helping tie ribbons on chair backs and arranging last-minute decorations. But every time I passed Owen, we exchanged a glance, a flicker, a silent check-in. You good? Yeah. You? At some point, Jordan dragged me into the lodge kitchen to help ice cupcakes, of all things. I was halfway through frosting a lopsided one when he looked over at me and said, "Hey, you and Owen seemed pretty chummy last night." I dropped the spatula. Wait, what? I said, wiping frosting off my wrist. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Relax, man. I'm just saying, it's cool. You guys talked more last night than you have in, like, 10 years. Oh, yeah, just catching up. He shrugged and went back to icing, but my heart didn't slow down for a solid 5 minutes. The wedding went off without a hitch. It was actually kind of beautiful. The lake behind the altar, sunlight catching on the water, a gentle breeze that made the bride's veil flutter like something out of a rom-com. I stood next to Jordan while he gave his speech, trying not to think about the way Owen looked in his suit. Tall, broad-shouldered, sharp jawline. He caught me staring once, halfway through the reception. He didn't look away. That night, the dancing started, and the drinks flowed harder than ever. Jordan found someone's abandoned cowboy hat and wore it for 2 hours straight. I ended up on the dance floor with a glass of champagne in one hand and no rhythm whatsoever. Eventually, I slipped outside for air. The patio was empty, soft music still drifting out through the doors. I leaned on the railing and looked out at the lake. Then I heard footsteps. "I was hoping I'd find you out here," Owen said, his tie loose around his neck, his hair slightly messy like he'd been running a hand through it all night. "I needed air," I said, my voice soft. "Me too." He stood beside me again, just like on the dock, but this time it wasn't nervous or hesitant. He looked over at me, serious. "I meant what I said last night," he said. "Which part?" "That you make this hard." I smiled faintly. "Still thinking things you shouldn't?" Owen's eyes met mine. "No, I'm thinking things I want to." We stood there in the quiet, the stars stretching overhead, the lake perfectly still. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I don't want it to be just a moment." "Then don't let it be." He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together. His grip was warm, solid, like an anchor. "I keep thinking," he said, "about how stupid I was in high school. I barely noticed you. I wish I had." "Maybe it wouldn't have been the right time," I said. "Maybe this is." He nodded slowly. "I'm still figuring it out, but I want to figure it out. With you." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Because in that moment, it felt like something was beginning. The wedding party didn't wind down until almost 2 a.m. People were passed out on couches, sprawled on the floor in sleeping bags, half-dressed and barefoot, with discarded champagne glasses and crumpled napkins littering every available surface. Jordan, naturally, was among the last to crash, mumbling something about needing to guard the cupcakes, before falling face first onto one of the living room couches. I helped clean up a little, clearing plates, stacking glasses, more out of nervous energy than responsibility. Owen disappeared for a bit, and I figured he was helping someone else or maybe just catching a breather. It was stupid, but I missed him the second he was out of sight. I was halfway to brushing my teeth in the shared bathroom when I saw him again, standing at the far end of the hallway, leaning casually against the doorframe of one of the empty guest rooms. His tie was gone, the top few buttons of his shirt undone. He didn't say anything, just tilted his head, like he was inviting me without words. My heart started pounding. I looked around. The hallway was empty. The lodge was quiet. I walked toward him slowly, like I was crossing into a decision I couldn't undo. He stepped back into the room, and I followed, closing the door quietly behind us. There was only one lamp on, a soft amber glow filling the room. The bed was unmade. A suit jacket had been tossed onto a chair. Owen stood near the window, hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure what the next move was. "Hey," he said. "Hey, you okay?" I nodded. "Are you?" He hesitated. "I want to be." I stepped closer, closing the distance between us until we were face to face. The silence was thick, but not uncomfortable. It felt like it was holding space for something we hadn't said yet. "I've been trying to talk myself out of this all day," he said, his voice low, like he was admitting something dangerous. "And?" He looked at me then, fully, deeply, and for the first time all weekend, I saw it. The vulnerability beneath the charm, the fear behind the confidence, the part of him that didn't have it all figured out. And I didn't answer. Just reached up, rested a hand on the side of his neck, felt the warmth of his skin, the slight tremble in his pulse. He kissed me. It wasn't like the kiss on the deck. This one was slower, heavier, like we were both trying to memorize it. His hands found my waist, pulled me closer, and I sank into him, my fingers slipping into his hair. It was all heat and breath and tension unspooling. We didn't talk much after that. Clothes came off in careful, quiet movements. Not rushed, not clumsy, just deliberate. Like neither of us wanted to forget a single detail, the way his hands moved over my skin, the way our breaths synced up, the way he whispered my name when he thought I wasn't listening. We didn't have that. Not that night. It wasn't about that. We just lay there afterward, tangled together in the dim light, our bodies soft and warm under the thin blanket. Owen's arm was draped over my chest, his fingers drawing slow circles over my skin. My head was spinning in the best possible way. "You okay?" I asked softly. He nodded against my shoulder. "Yeah." I just didn't think this was something I'd ever let myself have. I turned slightly to look at him. "And now?" "I'm still scared," he said. "But I'm not letting that stop me anymore." We didn't sleep much. Not because we kept doing anything physical, but because we couldn't stop talking. Whispers in the dark about who we were, what we wanted, and how crazy it was that we'd ended up here. And when we did fall asleep, it was with his hand in mine, and my heart feeling like it finally had a place to rest. When I woke up, it took me a second to remember where I was. The room was quiet, early morning light slipping through the half-closed blinds. My body was warm under the covers, and the soft weight beside me was still there. Owen. He was on his side, one arm tucked beneath his pillow, the other resting across my stomach like it belonged there. His breathing was slow, steady, peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that way too. I just laid there for a while, listening to him breathe, trying to wrap my head around what had happened. Not just the kiss, not just the night we'd shared, but everything. The looks, the tension, the conversations that had started to mean more than either of us had expected. Eventually, he stirred, blinking awake with a soft, confused frown before his eyes landed on me. And then he smiled. "Morning," he said, voice gravelly and low. "Morning." He stretched, yawned, and rested his forehead against my shoulder. "You still here? Good. You thought I wouldn't be?" He shrugged, looking a little embarrassed. "I don't know. I've never done anything like this before." "Like what?" "Let someone in." That hit me harder than it should have. We lay there a bit longer, quiet and tangled together. But eventually, the real world started creeping back in. Voices in the hallway, doors opening and closing, The distant sound of laughter and someone banging pots around in the kitchen. "Should we get up?" I asked. Owen groaned. "Do we have to?" "Pretty sure Jordan's gonna send out a search party if we don't." He smirked, then leaned in and kissed me. Quick, soft, like a promise. "Okay, let's go be normal people again." We dressed in comfortable silence, occasionally bumping into each other and grinning like idiots. I grabbed my sweatshirt from the floor. He fixed his hair in the mirror with mild frustration. We looked like two guys, trying not to look like two guys who just shared a bed. It was kind of ridiculous. But the second we stepped into the hallway, the bubble popped. Jordan was standing there, holding a box of leftover cupcakes. He blinked when he saw us, eyes bouncing from me to Owen and back again. And I froze. Everything in me went stiff, defensive, bracing for something I couldn't quite name. But then Jordan just raised an eyebrow and said, "Took you guys long enough." I blinked. "What?" Jordan shrugged. "Come on, Eli. I've known you since puberty. And Owen's been weird since you got here. I just didn't think you'd both take this long to figure it out." I stared at him. Owen scratched the back of his neck, looking sheepish. "You're okay with this?" I asked slowly. Jordan rolled his eyes. "I'm not your dad. And I'm not an idiot. As long as no one's getting hurt, I'm good. Actually," he gave Owen a look, "I'm impressed. You finally stopped being emotionally constipated." Owen groaned. "God, I hate you," Jordan grinned. Yeah, now help me carry this crap to the car." The rest of the day was a blur of goodbyes, packing, and promises to stay in touch. The bride cried during her third farewell speech. Someone lost their shoes. Typical post-wedding chaos. But in the car ride back, me, Owen, and Jordan crammed in with leftover decorations and a very angry houseplant someone forgot to water. It felt different. Owen reached for my hand in the back seat. Didn't say anything, just held it. And Jordan didn't say a word about it. He just turned up the radio and kept driving. It wasn't some grand, sweeping moment. There was no dramatic confession in the rain, no sudden announcement that we were a couple. What happened after the wedding was smaller than that. Quieter. But it meant more. Owen texted me the next day. Just, "Dinner this week? Just us?" I said yes. We didn't define it that night. We just sat across from each other at a cozy, half-empty Thai place he picked near his apartment, sipping Singa and sharing spring rolls. We talked about work, movies, podcasts we'd been listening to. It was normal. But the way he looked at me, that wasn't just friendly. And when he reached across the table to brush his thumb over mine, that wasn't casual either. The weeks that followed were slow and a little messy. We had to find our footing. Owen wasn't used to opening up, and I was terrified of reading too much into everything. But he kept showing up. He'd text me randomly just to ask how my day was. He started sending me songs he thought I'd like, links to stupid memes, short voice notes when he was half asleep and didn't feel like typing. It was nothing, and it was everything. The first time we stayed over at his place, he made pancakes in the morning and acted like it was no big deal. Like making breakfast for someone wasn't the most intimate damn thing in the world. He was nervous though. I could tell. Not in the way he touched me. He was confident there, but in the pauses. The silences that lingered a little too long when the topic got close to us. Like he was afraid to ask, "What are we?" Eventually I asked, first. We were walking through a farmer's market on a chilly Saturday morning, sipping overpriced coffee and arguing about the right way to cook eggs. He brushed my arm with his, then caught my eye with that look, the one that still hit me like a sucker punch. "You ever think about where this is going?" I asked, trying to keep it light. He didn't dodge, didn't joke. "Every day," he said. We stopped walking. I watched his jaw tighten, just a little. "I don't have all the answers," he continued, "but I want this. I want you. And I want to see where this goes, if you're still in." I didn't say anything right away. Just took his hand in mine, right there between the jam vendor and the couple selling succulents. "I'm in," I said. That was months ago. We're still figuring things out. He's still Owen, blunt, sarcastic, sometimes emotionally clueless. And I'm still me, overthinking, worrying, afraid to fall too hard. But we're in it, together. He makes me laugh when I'm being too serious. I make him talk when he tries to hide behind his usual walls. And some nights, when we're just lying there in bed, tangled up with no need for words, I think about how this all started. A wedding invite. A shared look. A kiss under the stars that neither of us planned. And somehow, against all odds, it turned into something real.